Well, it's time for another pocket change, and this time we're looking at leaders in transition, how to get the transition right. And it's a big deal. And most of the stuff that we talk about in change is a big deal. And if these videos have been any help to you, well, please go ahead and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and passing them on to other people. That's how my little network gets built, is word of mouth. So pass it on if you will, and give those in your network some meaty information they can really sink their teeth into. Now, there are very many ways to come into a transition. Maybe you're the new CEO, maybe you're the new HR director, but you're going from one situation very often where you are a master technician and you know more about that part of the business than anyone else, into a higher level leadership position. And one theme we'll come back to in this video a couple times is what got you here might not get you there, wherever there is. So you may also be coming in under a cloud. Maybe you're put there for reasons other than competence. But you're in good company. Winston Churchill, at the Second World War, he was actually the second choice for prime minister. And he was admired and respected by few and liked by even fewer. And so my question to you is, how can you, in your transition, rise to the occasion, even though there are going to be a lot of problems along the way? Well, the first thing in rising to the occasion is to do first things first. Do the right things in the right way. And if you do that, you have a lower risk of attrition, so people leaving. You have an 80 or 90% higher chance of actually attaining the goals that you have been given. And McKinsey, in their article on transitioning leaders, says that people rank transitioning into a new leadership position above bereavement, divorce, and health issues. Of course, it probably depends on the bereavement, the divorce, or the health issues, but you get an idea of how serious it actually is. And what is the hardest thing? 2/3 of people in their survey said was the very hardest thing: politics. And so how are you going to handle the politics? Because if you've come from a situation where you've been the big boss and you've been there for a while, or you are the master technician, or you are the functional expert, and you're coming into a higher level position, the politics are really important. Maybe political games that you haven't played before. And maybe they're not political games in the negative way, but there's just a lot more communication, a lot more interaction at a higher, more abstract level than you're used to. Now, companies try to address this with, buddy systems, or they'll have an introduction program of some kind. They even have a 90 or 100-day agenda to follow, and I'm not necessarily against that. But the thing that seems to work the best, that organizations do the least, is a tailored executive coaching program along with a customized assimilation plan. So those two things, a customized assimilation plan for you, specifically for you, and tailored executive coaching. Those two things are going to be really important in your transition. And one tip, just rolling into the tip section here, is just like strategy, one of the most important decisions you can make in the beginning is, what am I not going to do? What am I not going to do? And once you've made that decision, try to stick with it as well as you can, even though it may be very difficult. So in McKinsey's recently published article on this, they have sort of two phases here. They say take stock and take action. In other words, sort of look and then leap. All right. So they say, what is your function? So sort of take stock. What are you actually being put in there to do? Many years ago, I took over leadership of a very large help desk for the EMEA region for IBM. I thought I was going in there to be the big boss, but it turns out the day I took over was the day they also announced that it was moving from the Netherlands to Dublin. And I wasn't going to be the big boss. I was going to be the guy who had to fire everyone, who had to help people find jobs, who had to go through the transition, who had to travel to Dublin. It was a very, very different thing. What are you actually being hired to do? What are you actually put in that place to do? And once you know that, align and mobilize your team around you. The second thing is culture. Oh, it's so squishy, and it's so you can't really put numbers to it. And you can't. Actually, you can put numbers to it, and there are very clear ways to look at culture that will even satisfy the CFO. Yeah. So let's make sure that we don't allow the idea of culture as this sort of vague thing of feelings and just give it off to the human resources people. No. Culture is how we do things around here. And aligning the strategy and the culture together, the strategy, the guiding path, and the culture, the driving path, making sure those two are aligned is job priority number one. And once you know what that alignment is, take that team of yours and take that agenda of yours and keep driving and hammering home on the right things. The third thing that McKinsey came up with was making sure you've got the right team. Well, absolutely. And assessing the team and making sure you have the right one so that you can drive the strategic agenda, the culture agenda, so that you're going to achieve the goals that you've been put there to get is, of course, very, very important. And to the extent that they're not yet a high-performing team, you need to take them there. And some interesting research from George Binney from about 15 years ago shows that in leaders in transition, what you really want to do is try to get close, but not too close. And protect them, spread your leadership wings to protect them from bureaucratic nonsense from above. Help them help you by keeping their backs clear. Be their wingman, if you will. The fourth thing is to take stock of yourself. Who are you and how are you wired up? And what typical things do you like to do and what typical things do you like to avoid? And how will you make sure that what you're doing, whether you like it or not, is aligned with the culture and the strategy and what you've been asked to do? And here's where that executive coaching comes in. Somebody who can just kick you in the shin when you need it, and also give you that encouragement when that's appropriate. Again, usually what got you here is not going to get you there. And number 5, maybe part of that political landscape you need to know more about, stakeholders. And of course, the most important stakeholder is the shareholder, and we lose sight of that sometime. That is the most important stakeholder. You've got to make money or there's no mission. However, you do have probably a very wide palette of other people, other stakeholders, which have sometimes been defined as people who can ruin your project or people who can ruin your business unit. And so thinking about these more broadly and spending more time on that, and this was what people might be calling political, spending more time building those relationships and exercising leadership influence than being technically correct and knowing how the business runs and leading in that way. So I mentioned before a 90 or 100-day plan, and I'm not against it. That's not a bad idea, is it? It gives some structure to the whole thing. And if you don't have some sort of structure going in, if you haven't thought about this, well, it's a whirlwind. You're just dropped into a raging sea of issues, and it's, just keeping your head above water is about all you can do. But you have some time. You have some time to get these things done. For example, if you need to develop a strategic vision, you've got sort of 8 months, that you can work on this after the summer vacation, this kind of thing if you've come in at the beginning of the year. If you don't have a vision, let's say you're head of a business unit or you're head of some other geographical area or a department someplace, you might not have your own vision, but then you need to have the company's vision and talk with your team and say, how are we going to achieve that vision? What does that vision mean for what we're doing here? And so this needs to be worked into your strategy. It needs to be worked into your culture, the culture driving that strategy. And you've got, 8 months, 9 months time to do this before things kind of go off the boil. Approximately the same thing goes for winning support of employees. And having a good agenda and having the right things on that agenda, the right items, so that you are impact-driven and not agenda-driven, is going to be of critical importance. I remember as a director visiting some of our operations in Chile, and I was walking around the manufacturing area, the production area, and people were sort of looking at me, and I said, well, a lot of people seem to be staring at me. Is something wrong? And they said, no, but we haven't seen an executive director here in 5 years. So here was an executive director taking his time to go and visit with people and look at what was going on the production floor. And it's kind of hard to do. You get overwhelmed by all the abstract issues and maybe all the political issues at the higher levels, and you forget that going through the plant and talking to people not only is good for you and your soul, but it's so good for your people as well and shows real leadership. So building the vision and kind of winning people's hearts and minds in that way, it's going to take you 8 or 9 months, and before that all goes off the boil. So you've got a little bit of time there. Getting your team right, we're looking more at a year. Let's say 12 months, maybe slightly more, but not much more than that. And that isn't a long time. If you have to replace people, if you have to coach people and find out if they need replacing, a year is a pretty short time. And if you do need to replace people, how long is it going to take to get them in? For example, you go 6 months and you find out your procurement director just isn't up to the task. And so you go look for someone, that's another month or 2, and then they've got to give notice, that's another few months. And it's 12 months before the new person is in there and you need to integrate them into the team and get going. So, not a lot of time there, and that needs to be a primary thing. But you do have some time. It's not like you need to correct everything within the first month. Now, turning around a poorly performing company, or maybe reinventing how they do business, or giving the business a different kind of focus, now we're talking something like 2 years. Yeah. Again, not a long time once you get to it. And if you've ever gone on some of these initiatives and you think, by the end of the year, it's what I always hear as a consultant. By the end of the year, we should be able to do this, or the end of Q1, and then Q1 comes and goes, and then we're like, here in the summer, and then it's the end of the second year, and you're going into your second Q1, and that's about as much time as it takes. So really planning up front. If you have to turn the business around, if you've got to reorient the business in some way, it's going to take you about 2 years to do this. And all of the other stuff all at the same time. And these are the kinds of things that should drive your agenda. These are the impacts that you need to have that should populate your agenda. So to review, new leaders, connect with people. You have some time to do it. Connect with people, get the vision and the culture and the strategy aligned. Make sure you're getting your team aligned behind all of that. Ensure that you yourself are coached in this situation and that you are not focusing on all those things that made you successful before, but you're going to be focusing on all the things that are going to make you successful now. And that might mean some more politics. That might mean broadening the kinds of stakeholders you engage with on a regular basis. Well, if this has been helpful, I'd love to help you in your business or your transition. So give me a call or an email and we can talk about how I might be able to help you with some very practical, no-nonsense insight into this very complex, but ultimately satisfying transition in the life of a new leader. Thanks a lot.